I think I've got a profitable podcast blueprint I can start with, which is great. Would you agree that a small business owner, an entrepreneur, coach, consultant, dentist, professional, we don't need, at least I know I don't, I know my clients don't, we don't need a huge audience in order to monetize the podcast and to bring in clients, customers, and patients into our business. We don't need a bazillion downloads a month.
Correct. And what I know to be true is that you are the solution to someone else's problem. There are people who are literally waiting and praying for you to show up in their lives right now.
I'm Ken Newhouse. Building a profitable business isn't only about generating leads and driving sales. It's about who we are and what we're made of. It's about finding the most effective methods to persuade, inspire, and ignite the imagination of others so you can succeed in business. If you're a member of the new breed of entrepreneur, I invite you to join the quest as we reveal the newest and most effective methods you can use to get clients now. Does the thought of wasting time listening to another useless podcast concern you? Even worse, does it frustrate you to listen to podcasts heavy on the hype and skimping on the substance? We both know how precious your time is, and that's why I'm mentioning this right up front. If the thought of having a podcast that consistently brings high-value new clients into your business appeals to you, today's episode may provide the perfect solution you've been searching for. You know, I regularly share 3 important time facts with clients and coaching members to help them decide if an activity is a worthwhile investment of their time, because you can always get more clients, you can always make more money, but you can't get more time. You know, I want to be crystal clear about the exact person for whom today's episode is for. It's for coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs who want to leverage the power of a podcast they can use to consistently bring high-value new clients into their core business. The individuals today's episode was created for also share something in common. They have learned having your own podcast can give you authority, power, and preeminent positioning in the marketplace and make you a dominant player in your niche. They understand a podcast-centric marketing strategy makes a business's client acquisition capabilities more sophisticated and effective. I'll also tell you right up front that what me and my guests are sharing today will make many podcast purists cringe and shake their heads in disbelief, because 100% of our effort is invested in showing you how to create a podcast that can elevate your authority in the marketplace, increase demand for your services, and function as a powerful new client attraction system for your business. If you have an existing service-based business, are a bit of a maverick, and you're willing to follow a blueprint that shows you how to use a podcast as a Trojan horse for bringing high-value new clients into your core business, today's episode was created specifically for you. Today's episode is not for the person who believes it's essential to earn your way up the ladder of podcasting success, i.e. putting in your time, preached by self-proclaimed podcasting purists, that podcasts need to follow the model that every quote-unquote traditional podcaster is using, for people who believe a successful podcast must rank in the top 10 on iTunes, and it's not for people who believe that the only way to make real money in podcasting is from commercial sponsors. On the flip side of that, today's episode is for the person who believes accelerating the rate of new client acquisition is the best strategy for growing their business. Efficiency and maximum profitability are important. Having a podcast framework, content, and sales process based on direct response marketing is essential to the success and profitability of their core business. They also believe that they have 100% control of their podcast format, content, growth, and sales process. Creating and airing shows based on what they want to say and how they want to say it is the right way to build a profitable and successful podcast. That their show should be about solving big problems that guests, listeners, and subscribers have, and then delivering big solutions they want and expect. And lastly, they believe that they can use their podcast to consistently bring high-value new clients into their business, as well as generate sales of products and services to the people in their listening audience. And that's exactly what today's interview is all about. And the benefits don't stop there, because your podcast can also elevate your authority and status in the marketplace, position you as an industry thought leader and go-to expert, and help you build the business you've always wanted and the bank account you deserve. Speaking of building impressive things, Steve Olsher is known as the world's foremost reinvention expert, famous for helping individuals and corporations become exceptionally clear on their what, that is, the one thing they were created to do, and his practical, no-holds-barred approach to life and business propels his clients towards achieving massive profitability while also cultivating a life of purpose, conviction, and contribution. A 30-plus year as an entrepreneur, Steve is the founder and editor-in-chief of Podcast Magazine, online pioneer who launched on CompuServe's Electronic Mall in 1993, New York Times best-selling author of What is Your What, discover the one amazing thing you were born to do, creator of the new Media Summit, host of the #1 rated podcasts, Reinvention Radio and Beyond 8 Figures, international keynote speaker. Yes, the list goes on, just a few more. In-demand media guest who's appeared on CNN, The Huffington Post, the cover of Founder magazine, and countless other media outlets. Of course, if you want to need more details than what I can include on today's episode, I want to encourage you to be on the lookout for my third book, Profitable Podcast Blueprint. It's book #1 in a 3-part series I'm working on, and the book's going to be available on Amazon the day after Christmas, which is less than a month away. Alrighty then, if you're ready, let's get cracking and welcome my guest, Steve Olsher, onto the show. Want to go ahead and welcome you to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing the show. This is certainly a pleasure for me, a real treat, and I know it will be for the listeners of the podcast as well. But if you could, I like to start off every episode by asking our guest if they could take a minute or two, give us your backstory, bring us up to speed with where you are now, why it's relevant, because there may be a listener or two who quite possibly doesn't know who you are, what you've accomplished, which is, I mentioned in the bio, a tremendous amount of stuff. So if you could, tell us what we need to know to get the interview started.
Yeah, man. So 30 plus year entrepreneur, started out way back in the day in the world of music and nightclubs. Actually opened my own nightclub when I was 19, which of course was a non-alcoholic club, but started out really early, just trying to figure out how to rub a couple of dimes together and make a quarter, man. And did, just about everything under the sun since that time. And from catalogs and launching on CompuServe's electronic mall in 1993, and got in the world of real estate and doing development. Ended up developing about $50-odd million worth of properties. Unfortunately, like many at that time, got caught up in that bubble, and some projects did really well. Ended up giving a few back to the bank. Back to the drawing board, man. And that's where I started into this line of work of really trying to teach a lot of what had worked well for me. And then, of course, where some pitfalls potentially are to help other aspiring entrepreneurs avoid a lot of the same trials and tribulations and brain damage that I had to endure, man. So put that out in books and coaching and speaking and authoring and podcasting and all that fun stuff. And as you said, of late, we've really been going all in on the podcast landscape. And so we do a live event. We've got Podcast Magazine. We're developing an app. And we have our own shows as well. So yeah, man, it's been an interesting trek, and that's the world in 30 seconds, I guess.
You know, I'm a curious fellow. What's that sign say behind you? Got a guy, or actually, that's a lady with a hat, sunglasses. It's a mannequin with a gi on. Yeah, I guess that's your BJJ brown belt, I would imagine.
It is.
What's the whiteboard say with the squid on the board?
Yeah, well, that's a drawing from my youngest there. So. There's two sayings. One is fortune favors the bold, and the second one is you have to be brave. And two mantras I try to live by.
That's awesome, because last week's guest was Andrea Waltz, who is the co-author.
Go for No.
Go for No with her husband Richard Frenton. So it ties in perfectly. Wow, you guys must have talked to each other before you did the show. But let me ask you this: what's something about you? It's another question that I just love to ask my guests. I want to get a more personal side of to the guest, just instead of having them regurgitate, super awesome information. What's something about you that people in the marketplace typically don't know? Maybe even your coaching members, and I know you have a ton.
Yeah,
but you'd like them to know.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the question, and I would simply say, I mean, first and foremost, I'm pretty much an open book. How you see me on camera is definitely how you'll see me off camera. There are times when I'm serious and look like I have no sense of humor. And if you ask my family, they'll say there are times where I'm serious and have no sense of humor. And then, of course, there are other times where I'm more playful and silly, and that, just depends on the moment and the stage and so on, right? So I am pretty much an open book. But in terms of things that I might want folks to know that perhaps they don't know, I, in spite of all of the apparent success and the trappings and the things that you may see and have heard, and perhaps if you're familiar with the work that I do, you see some of the things that are put out in the public eye. But I will say just as much as the next person, the imposter syndrome for me is real. There's definitely moments of each day where I question why I have a seat at the table, so to speak. It's just kind of the who am I syndrome, if you will. And so that's an ongoing battle to really try to boost myself up to the point where I actually reflect how I believe that others may see me, right? So it's an internal struggle to really match the two.
Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome, not many of us are willing to admit that we have that from time to time. Like we have that feeling like, how did I get here? Do I really deserve this? Am I qualified to be here? But just in my time of interviewing some amazing guests, I mean, you're one of them. I'd say that the people that I have on the show, even though they've accomplished just amazing things, are just really, and I don't mean this to diminish your accomplishments, they're just regular folks. They're regular folks who've done amazing things. And so I can understand why that happens from time to time. But anyway, let's do this before we dive into the topic that I want to talk about a lot today, because it's a hot topic, and that is having a podcast for your business, or that you can use to bring high value clients or customers or even patients into your core business. Let's just briefly, if we could, talk about your book, What is Your What?
Mm-hmm.
Take a minute or two, give us the backstory on that. And I just quickly want to mention that with every guest, I don't have any affiliate relationship. I get nothing out of this. I'm personally guaranteeing that you will get multiples of multiples in value from not only Steve's book, but the coaching program he's going to talk about a little bit later in the show. I'm going to guarantee that as well. But you're going to invest in the book, read it, deploy it. It will deliver tremendous value for you. If you can't say that, email me at customerservice@kennewhouse.com. I'll reimburse you for the book. When it comes to the training, which we'll get into later, you're going to have to prove to Steve that you participated, you've done whatever exercises he has in the course, so on and so forth, and he'll report back to me. And if for whatever weird reason, which has never happened, you don't get just tremendous exponential benefits of your investment, then he'll contact me and I'll reimburse you for that as well. And I do that because the only people I can have on my show are people that I'm fully confident in making that guarantee. It's a risk for myself, but at the same time, it allows me to have the world's top-notch guests on the show. So if you could, Steve, give us the backstory on the book, some of the benefits a reader might get from the book, because it's a really good book.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. So long story short, for many, many, many years, and even still to this day, I mean, I think there's always some question, there's always some just conversation going on in the back of my mind of, am I really doing what it is that I'm meant and made to do? And so from an early age, in terms of my, let's just say my early career years, even though I was into music, even though I was into DJing and whatnot, and then ended up going into the catalog world, as I said, I think there were always in the back of my mind questions about, how am I naturally wired to excel, and what is it that I'm really here to do? And so I was never one of those people where that just came naturally to me, where I just, there are people who I call them birthers in the book, What is Your What, right?
Yeah.
And there's just people who kind of knew from the cradle, who they are and what they want to do and where their strengths are. And they just never seem to struggle with anything from a career perspective. And I just have never been one of those people. So I started out down many a path that I know so many have taken, in terms of reading What Color's Your Parachute, or taking the Myers-Briggs, or, Strengths Finders, whatever those modalities are. And I would just simply say that most of those ended up leaving me with more questions than answers, right? And so the idea was, what can we do here in terms of creating a framework that people can work with and work from, in order to be able to have a much better understanding of how they're naturally wired to excel, what that core gift is that each of us has, what's the primary vehicle that we'll use to share that gift, and then, really who are the people that we're most compelled to serve. And so that's the framework that I created for What is Your What, mostly as a guide with which to help me really hit the ground running and have a clear understanding of what I need to be doing on the daily basis. And I started teaching that in something called the Reinvention Workshop, first as the in-person workshop, and then eventually it became an online course. But as I began working with people and really trying to help them while also helping myself try to figure out what it is that I'm here to do, how I'm wired to excel, what is it that I can do that will, as Steve Jobs once said, right, leave that dent in the universe. And so as I began trying to figure this out and teaching this framework and whatnot, it just really became clear that if you can answer those three fundamental questions of what is your core gift, what's the primary vehicle you use to share that gift, and then who are the people that you're most compelled to serve, you'll find where your passion, your profits, and your skills all intersect. And for most people, that's a challenge they'll spend a lifetime trying to solve that puzzle on.
Just to encapsulate it for the person listening who's on the fence and they're like, you know what? Ken recommended the book. He's guaranteeing it. I'm going to probably invest in it. What would you say are one or two of the biggest benefits that the reader of that book, if they deploy and follow obviously it's not magic. They can't just buy it and leave it on the coffee table and expect it, or on their Kindle or whatever. They got to deploy it. What are one or two huge impactful benefits a reader can reasonably expect to get from reading and deploying the things in your book?
So I would say that the primary benefit is, number one, you'll have you'll light a fire in your soul, right? And that fire in your soul is what will literally drive you on a day-to-day basis. Because I think, and I should better say, I know from personal experience and having worked with now thousands of people over the years, that the main issue for folks who lack that fire in their soul and who wake up in the morning with just kind of this sense of dread, it's just another day, is they do not have clarity on how they can impact those that they are most compelled to serve. And what I know to be true is that you are the solution to someone else's problem. There are people who are literally waiting and praying for you to show up in their lives right now. And so once you have clarity around just, again, what puts fire in your soul and who you're most compelled to serve, the main benefit is that there just won't be enough hours in the day to get done, what it is that you're here to do. And that's the biggest difference, right? Because once you have clarity on what your what is, and you understand who those people are that you're most compelled to serve and how you're going to serve them using the gifts that you have, again, you'll just wake up with that fire, in your soul to jump out of bed every day. Things that used to bother you will carry a lot less weight. And the fact of the matter is you'll be able to earn much more than perhaps you ever have and really create that life and lifestyle that you both deserve and desire.
And something else I just want to add to that, not only everything he said is true, but in fact, not just monetarily will you have a lifestyle that you never dreamed about, but imagine doing work every single day where you're extremely passionate about it, where it literally, the work itself is almost the reward. Obviously, we're in business, as Meenal Dan used to say, to make a profit on purpose. But the fact remains is I've done work that I hated and got paid a ton of money for it. Steve, I know you can understand this completely, but working with someone that you shouldn't have worked with, which doesn't happen now, I'm sure for you as well. But in the past, working with someone...
it still happens.
Okay, so working with someone that you made a mistake in accepting as a client, and it's like a nightmare. And so you get paid great money, but you just hate it, versus doing something, maybe you do pro bono work for somebody and you just absolutely just love it. Therein lies the difference. And that was one of the other benefits I got from reading the book and deploying that, is that being passionate about the work you do is a reward in and of itself. It's not just the money. And, money is why we're in business. But again, it's about really loving what you do during the day as well. So I'm going to kind of segue into the next section. You obviously are the editor-in-chief, at least unless you got replaced last time we talked a couple of days ago.
I'll only get replaced if we get bought.
There you go. Well, there's some hopeful thinking. Maybe. Yes. I don't know if you want to sell it. But anyway, so you're the editor-in-chief, founder of Podcast Magazine. Yes, the founder.
Yes, 100%.
100%. So give us a little bit of a backstory on Podcast Magazine. What's the magazine about? By the way, it's a great magazine. I am a paying subscriber. It's worth the investment to subscribe to the magazine. But what's the magazine about? Who's it for? What are some of the benefits people will get when they read the magazine?
Yeah. So I've been in the land of podcasting since 2009 when we released our first episode of Reinvention Radio. So I've been a fan of podcasting for a long time. And what became very clear to me just a couple of years ago is that this is a growing industry. I mean, there's a really big opportunity here for everyday folks to be able to have ostensibly their own radio station, right? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, is you have the ability to create your own radio station where you can reach almost anyone on the planet at almost any time, and almost anywhere, right? Just as long as they have an internet connection. And so I very quickly, again, going back to the days of radio and DJing in clubs and so on and so forth, I mean, I very quickly had an affinity for the medium just because, it is something that I believe it is one of the most empowering tools that we have. I mean, for the average person to be able to sit in their bedroom and record something and have someone halfway around the globe hear that and be able to learn from that person. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you come right down to it. So, I mean, and obviously the internet's been around for a long time and people are like, well, that's just pretty much the internet that you're describing, Stephen. Yes, I mean, it is, but podcasting is obviously a little bit of a different take on what you can do in terms of the online world. So long story short, about a couple years ago, back in 2017 or so, I really started going more all in on the world of podcasting. Again, seeing that there was the opportunity here for pretty tremendous growth, and recognizing that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of shows that aren't the Joe Rogans of the world, right? I mean, I love the Joe Rogans of the world. Don't get me wrong, in terms of what he's done is really help just validate the power of the medium, right? So you can't be mad at Joe for that. He's got 190 million downloads a month. You may not agree with what he says or what he does or those sort of things, but you can certainly applaud him for what he's been able to do for the medium. But for every one Joe Rogan, there's 190 odd million other types of people out there who want to be Joe that aren't, right? So not to say that there's that many shows, of course, but the reality is that I sat back and I said, you know what? I really love this medium. I can't believe that there isn't an industry publication right now that gives people the opportunity to go beyond the microphone and deeper into the lives of the podcasters that they hear and go deeper into the stories that they spend so much time listening to. And why isn't there a Sports Illustrated type magazine, whether it's digital or print, and we ended up doing both, for podcasts? Why isn't there a Vanity Fair type magazine, for celebrities for podcasts? Why isn't there a Wired type magazine for tech? Right, for podcasts. And so as I began running down the list of all of these other publications that had carved out their niche and seemed to do really, really well, it just began to make more and more sense to dive into the arena here of let's create something that's not for podcasters, although there are, of course, podcasters that read the magazine, but let's really take a consumer-facing, fan-focused approach to creating a publication that really celebrates this medium and the people that are in it. And that was the impetus for creating the magazine. And then, of course, really knowing that, as I said, there's so many shows that are out there that you're never going to hear about, but you should be listening to. We really, really did our best, and I think we've done a pretty good job in the first 10 odd months here of helping to solve the discoverability issues that really do plague the industry of trying to be discovered if you're a podcaster with a show that you just don't have these huge deep pockets, or if you're a fan and you're tired of just seeing all the same shows on the charts.
What's your earliest memory of podcasting? You mentioned that you started in 2009.
Yeah.
Going back into the deep recesses of your mind. And by the way, I just want to throw this in. I think I put my money on you versus Joe Rogan in the octagon any day of the week. I know he...
Oh, no. Have you seen Joe? Yeah. That guy is a beast, man.
I was just having fun. Just having fun. Yeah, I mean, obviously, think about it. He's calling all the big shows. He knows all these guys personally. He's training with probably most of the top mixed martial artists in the world. So I thought I'd get a little rise out of you with that one. But.
Thank you for that. I mean, I would say so, except for the fact that, man, that guy has, I mean, he trains with, Eddie Bravo. And I mean, like he's been Jocko, and I mean, he's been deep in the space for
How's
for a
that
long
for a headline
time.
for Podcast Magazine? Editor-in-chief of Podcast Magazine throws the challenge to Rogan down on the mat or something, into the octagon or whatever.
You know what? That is a great idea. And, I will make sure that my life insurance policy is paid and up to date, and I'll take one for the team. Just as a complete aside, I had the privilege, if you've listened to the Jocko Willink show, and you know Jocko, I had the privilege of sitting down with him back in March, right before all the COVID stuff hit in 2020 here, and so he came to one of our events, and we sat down, and I had an opportunity to take some pictures with him and all. We both put our fists up, in the photo, just kind of fist to the camera kind of thing.
Yeah.
This guy, if you're familiar with Thor, right? And the
Thor's
Thor hammer.
Yeah.
This guy, his mitts he's literally twice as big as my hand. It's unbelievable how big that guy is. I was thinking at some point, I'm like, let me go down and just, throw down with Jocko. There's no way him or Rogan are on the same page. They're both beasts.
They are. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but what's your earliest memory of podcasting in and of itself?
Yeah, I became familiar with, like I said, with the medium really, really early on. And the earliest memory that I have, I would say it was right around that same time of 2009, somewhere in there. And it was, I'm drawing a blank on the guy they call the Podfather, Adam Curry. Thank you. I knew it was an Adam. I just knew it wasn't Corolla. And so Adam Curry had been doing a bit in the space already. And some other people that I knew, Jason Van Orden and Joel Comm and some other types of people, who were pretty early in the tech space, had been doing some things. And I've always, I have both the blessing and the curse of being really early into a lot of things and just seeing really early on where the opportunities are. And the problem is for me that I usually bail on it because I get tired of it long before it hits critical mass. So this happened in .com, happened in real estate. Just my timing has been somewhat off. I would say the timing has been somewhat off with podcasting as well, because when I saw what those guys were doing, I was like, oh, this is super cool. I'm gonna go ahead and check this out and get into it and start releasing, my own episodes. And then, there was no traction, right? I mean, there's so few people who were listening and downloading. I just thought it was a waste of time. And it wasn't until I circled back to it around 2015 that I started getting back to creating shows on a consistent basis. But if I had stayed the course from 2009 to now, I think we'd be having a very different conversation.
So from a business owner's perspective, business owner listening to this podcast could be a professional person like a dentist, could be a chiropractor, could be a coach, consultant, an entrepreneur, some brick and mortar business owners. But thinking about it from their perspective, what about podcasting surprises, or as it relates to my listener directly, the listener I just described? What about podcasting surprises you most?
If you asked me that question a couple of years ago, I would have answered that question with the answer of the lack of diversity and the lack of shows that are niche oriented. So many shows were just going sort of really top level, and general business shows, general personal development shows, general health and fitness shows, right, et cetera, et cetera. And not a lot of people going really deep. And I thought there was a pretty good opportunity for people to go, super deep back at that in those days. Today, what surprises me most is actually how quickly the medium has become dominated by people who have very, very, very deep pockets, and how the hobbyist nature, so to speak, of the medium that was so appealing out of the gate has largely been buried and offset by people who are just absolutely, people like NPR and people like Spotify and Will Ferrell, right? You see a celebrity like Will Ferrell coming into podcasting, and on one hand, it's great. It gets more people listening. But on the other hand, how many of us have the ability to launch a new season of our show and then land on Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and Stephen Colbert on the same night, right? It's insane. So on one hand, it's obviously the validation of the medium, which is great. But at the same token, it's just getting to the point now where, it really is becoming a corporate game.
Okay, so having said that, I want to follow up with this question then. But would you agree that a small business owner, an entrepreneur, coach, consultant, dentist, professional, we don't need, at least I know I don't, I know my clients don't, we don't need a huge audience in order to monetize the podcast and to bring in clients, customers, and patients into our business. We don't need a bazillion downloads a month. We don't need that. In fact,
correct.
I'm going to finish the year with, I think COVID really hurt me, but around 150,000, 150, that'd be terrible. I don't think you'd be on the show if I had 150 downloads for the year, but 150,000 for the year, which I think would be at least over 200 easily because of COVID. I mean, I've seen a decrease of the people I've talked to. There's a dent in their downloads, and I don't know if it's because of the presidential election or COVID or the mixture of all the above, the weirdness of 2020, but you would agree there's still a place for business owners to have a podcast they can use as a vehicle to bring new people, new clients, customers, or patients into their business.
Well, I mean, look, what I would say is not only is there a place for it, but the reality is that that's actually what we practice and what we preach, right? From the standpoint of the beautiful thing about podcasting is that it doesn't take you don't have to have, and that's what I was talking about for one of those bigger, general shows, right? You don't have to have one of those bigger general shows with a huge number of downloads in order to really put this medium to work for you. So one of the things that I love so much about the medium and what I love about what we're seeing now in terms of more and more shows that are becoming more and more niche specific is that the opportunity for branding and building credibility and authority and leveraging the power of the medium, really is at it's certainly at its highest point ever that I can recall in terms of, let's say you're a dentist and you have built up a successful practice. And now what you're looking to do is you're looking to teach other dentists how to create successful practices. You don't need a 10,000 download an episode type of show in order to really move the needle into a $25,000 a year mastermind or a consulting type of program or whatever that might be. And we had an exact a case study that we had in a client who did exactly that. We had a dentist who had done really, really well with his practice and wanted to do whatever he could to try to teach others how to create profitable practices, right? So we branded him as the 10K a day dentist. And his goal was to help dentists get to $10,000 a day in gross revenue, right? For their practice. Mm-hmm. And so we branded him as the 10K a day dentist. So the 10K a day dentist is his brand. The 10K a day dentist is his podcast. The 10K a day dentist is his online course. And the reality is, it doesn't take very many people listening to that show in order for it to move the needle for him pretty substantially. So it's a very unique opportunity right now, and I love where we're at right now because again, you can create a very niche show, and with just a handful of listeners, you can convert those folks into loyal, borderline fanatic clients and of course, customers, right? So yeah, lots of opportunities for sure. And even in the smaller shows, 100%.
All right, I'm gonna ask you a question. You don't have to answer it, but I want you to answer it. What's been your biggest podcasting failure? How'd you overcome it?
Well, I would say that my biggest failure for sure has been just the lack of stick-to-itiveness, right? Because again, having jumped into the space as early as I did, I had an opportunity to really jumpstart so much of the career that I now have, that I'm fighting for, so to speak, in order to get to the point where, I could have been there if I had just stayed the course. So I would just simply say it was giving up on the medium because I wasn't seeing the results that I thought I should have been seeing long before, that expiration date would have hit, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the mistakes I think a lot of podcasters make. They start their show without really counting the cost, without really thinking it through and making the commitment ahead of time. And what is it, the average 8 shows and they're gone, they bail?
So pod fade,
yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is very real.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
unfortunate.
Real.
Okay, so you got two podcasts. You got Reinvention Radio, Beyond 8 Figures. Obviously, you said you could have been at the top of the game, but in fact, you are near or at the top of the niche on iTunes for both of those shows in their individual categories. So my question is, how does a person build a podcast like Reinvention Radio or Beyond 8 Figures? How does a person build such a successful, in your case, two successful, just unbelievably successful shows. Encapsulate that, keep it to 2 or 3 minutes if you could.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, by the way, we we have sold Reinvention Radio, beyond 8 figures, and we're in the process actually of selling Reinvention Radio. So that's a whole other discussion in terms of building a show to sell, which perhaps we can talk about at some point. But I would just simply say that the real secret to all of this is just having a very clear outcome and understanding of the benefits that are to be had for the listener. In other words, each show that you create, I don't mean each episode that you create, but I mean each show, because we've had multiple shows that we've created over time here. Each show that you create should have a very specific set of benefits and outcomes, if you will, for the listener. And so for Beyond 8 Figures, as an example, the benefit, if you will, for people to listen was it really would help them to understand how to start and scale and in some cases exit from their business by learning directly from entrepreneurs who have either sold their business for more than $10 million or currently run a business that grosses more than $10 million annually. So the listener really had the expectation of, look, every person that I'm going to hear from on this show is an 8-figure plus entrepreneur. And so that's a core promise, right? I mean, that is something where they can tune in and they can know every single show they're going to hear from someone who can help them in either stage of that business, starting or scaling or exiting, right? So the promise has to be really, really strong. So that's the main thing I would offer. And then, obviously the other side of that is you have to be really, really clear on what your profit path is. In other words, having clarity on why you're doing the show and what is the path that you want that listener to take, the steps on the path that you want that listener to take as it relates to your business and where your revenue model is structured, right? So having clarity on, what that last step is on the path that someone can take with you, and then working backwards from that so that the show and then the call to action reflects moving them onto that respective path.
As it relates to the individual, the person listening right now who's on the fence and they're like, you know what, I want to start a podcast. I think I've got a profitable podcast blueprint I can start with, which is great. But as it relates to the path you talked about, taking your listener down the path of monetization in your business, I think a lot of people are really, in fact, they're unclear about how to start a podcast and format it and everything else, but as well as what's all involved? What are the things that are involved that are critically important to customer relationship management, marketing automation, things like that? Because, obviously you're doing a show, you're going to get people who listen to your show. If you want to make an offer, which you should be making offers on your shows, whether it's for a lead magnet, whatever it might be, what are some of the things that are, I think a lot of people are missing out on? I know this is one of the things you guys work on a lot in your programs, is helping people build that whole system. So what's the kind of the back end of the podcast that most of the time isn't talked about when we talk about helping people start podcasts that'll help them monetize and integrate the podcast as a consistent profit generator for their business?
Yeah. And so, look, obviously there's the basics in terms of people getting advertisers or sponsors or partners or those sort of things. And that can work for sure. And depending on the show, I've got a buddy who has a show, a couple of interesting shows. I got one friend who has a show that is specific to audio files, right? People who really love stereo equipment and, really great sound. And, he's probably got 1,000 downloads an episode, right? Nothing crazy. But his CPMs are through the roof in terms of the people who advertise on the show, because the promise of the show is, look, I'm gonna deliver for you people who absolutely love great sound, right? They're audiophiles, and how do you target audiophiles, right? I mean, where do you find people who raise their hand and go, yeah, I'm a nut about sound? It's just so few and far between. So in his case, he can get those sort of sponsors, right, to pay top dollar to be able to reach those people. But at the same token, he can also get free equipment, people sending him things for him to test. He can also put together a mastermind, right, of people who are audiophiles and want to talk shop and that sort of thing. He can have affiliates, right, where he's making references or referrals, if you will, over to products and then receiving a percentage of those sales. If he this isn't something that he does, but if he wanted to, he could have a conversation with someone who is setting up a system in their house, and he could find out, look, let's talk about what it is that you want. What's most important to you? Let's step through it. Okay. And here's what I would recommend. You should do this. You should do this. This should do this, blah, blah, blah. He could then turn around and say to that person, hey, this is actually something I do, and turn that guest into a client. He could also turn around to his audience and he can say, if you want me to build this system for you at your place of residence or at your office or whatever it is, that's what my company does. Let's have a conversation, et cetera. Right. So lots and lots and lots of different options there that go far beyond just simply an advertiser.
I don't think I asked my question correctly because you gave me a fabulous answer, but it wasn't the one I was looking for. Let me try to be more direct. And this is one of the things I need to work on. Most people think that to start their own podcast, they need a microphone, a website, and they need to sit down and talk. But let's just assume for a second that somehow they have a blueprint, they create a great podcast, they start getting listeners. You need things on the back end to help you monetize that. So there's marketing automation, there's customer relationship management. And I think that's something you guys specialize in. You guys help your clients not only set up and format their podcast, but you help them with the whole marketing aspect of it, like a complete system.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have a year-long coaching type program with guidance and accountability and done-for-you services. Yeah, one of those done-for-you services is launching the podcast. Another one's building their online funnel. Another one's creating their online course. And yeah, right. So we do that. I mean, from soup to nuts in terms of starting with the branding, creating their highly defensible brand, if you will, giving them the opportunity to create that category of one in their respective niche, and really helping people become icons of influence in their respective niche. And so a podcast is a part of that,
right?
Because I don't care what business you're in, you need a core visibility strategy. And so that is something that we help our people really get clear on. And then, of course, we deploy everything that we create with them. So yeah, maybe that's a better answer to your question.
Yeah. Well, actually, both answers were awesome, but that's kind of what I was alluding to, because I want people to I want my listener to realize that you can't just have a podcast and then people just start calling your office. I mean, you've got to have tools and systems in place to help process all of the people that may be interested in your core business. It's not like, the phone's going to start ringing off the hook. There's a lot more to it. And that's something we're going to talk about in just a few seconds when we talk about some of the things you guys are working on. See, what's the one question today that I should have asked as it relates to using a podcast to bring new clients, customers in your business, but I didn't ask?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably would just say, is it mandatory? Is it necessary? Should everyone have a podcast? And I would just answer that. If I'm asking myself that question, I would answer that with no. I don't think everyone should have a podcast. I don't think some people just are not going to be great hosts. And there has to be, I mean, let's be real. I mean, there has to be an entertainment value and a listening value for somebody to tune in. And so not everyone is cracked up to be a host. But the good news is you don't have to be a host necessarily to take advantage of everything that the medium has to offer. The beautiful thing is, just like I'm doing now here on your show, Ken, right? I mean, it's you can be a guest on shows, and frankly, that's what a lot of our clients do choose to do, is they just choose to be a guest on a show, because reality is there's a lot less work that's involved when you're a guest on a show. I mean, it's your job, Ken, to get this out to as many people as possible. After we say goodbye, I'm just gonna hang up here and and then all the rest of the work is on you, right? So there's a lot to be said. I mean, that's why we train people to be guests on shows and turn every visibility opportunity into revenue. So we cover all sides of the spectrum here, from guesting to hosting to you really leveraging the power of new media to create revenue, et cetera. But yeah, not everybody should be a host.
Definitely, for sure. All right, so let's do this. Take a couple minutes, tell us what's going on in your business, some of the things you're doing to help people, because you've got some of the most compelling video testimonials I think I've ever seen as it relates to helping people use a podcast to bring new business, bring new clients, customers, or patients into their business, podcasting, a podcast hosting program. You got a whole bunch of different stuff. So fill us in on that.
Yeah. I mean, look, obviously just starting at the very top of the profit path here in terms of what we can do. If someone is looking for a full blown team by their side to really help them with positioning and becoming that icon of influence in their respective niche, that's where our Icon Maker year-long program comes in. And that includes done-for-you services and guidance and accountability and VIP days and one-on-one help and, all that fun stuff, right? So, I mean, that's really the soup to nuts type of offering, all the way down to free videos and trainings and so on, just to help people get to some answers that they need to get to, and everything in between, with online courses and standalone launch your podcast intensives and those sort of things as well. So pretty much we can meet people wherever they are. What's the website URL for your website? Well, I would say the basic website, just to kind of find out more information about everything that we've been talking about here, you just use my name, Steve Olsher, OLSHER.com. Then you're going to find a lot of information there. And then, of course, Podcast Magazine, is another place to go. And if you're looking for training around profiting from podcasts, let me give you a very simple URL to use here that'll take you straight into a free masterclass around learning how to profit from podcasts. So it's a bit.ly link. Try to keep it simple here. But bit.ly, so it's bit.ly/Olsher, so my last name, podcast. So bit.ly/Olsher, OLSHER, podcast. And that'll take you directly into that free training there and give you some more info around our Profiting from Podcasts program.
Hey, listen, Steve, I appreciate you being on the show today. And I know the listeners are going to really dig the input you gave today. It was really awesome having you on the show.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me.
I've discovered that building a podcast you can use to bring high-value new clients into your business has become the most effective marketing strategy I've ever discovered. And we've had many conversations recently about how you can build such a podcast for your business. One episode that comes to mind is episode 364, Discover how to attract high-value clients into your core business and make money with your podcast. My guest on that episode was David Hooper, the host of 2 #1 rated podcasts and the best-selling author of Big Podcast. And in that episode, we talked about how to build a podcast that attracts listeners and the steps you can take to get clients now. We went into detail on some of the key thoughts you want to have in mind as it relates to your ability to successfully host a podcast that attracts your perfect prospects and clients. Episode 364 is where you can find details for that. I'd also recommend episode 356. So you want to start a podcast with podcast legend and host of 5 top-ranked podcasts, also best-selling author, Kristen Meinzer. And in that episode, Meinzer's going to bring you behind the curtain and show you how to build a successful and profitable podcast. Meinzer's also going to show you how your podcast can be used to get more clients and make more sales. It's a wonderful complement to today's conversation. And most recently, Meinzer authored the bestseller, So You Want to Start a Podcast, a book that dives deep into the topic of podcasting that you can use to make your business even more profitable. Episode 356 with Kristen Meinzer for that. All those conversations you can find on the KenNewhouse.com website. Now, before wrapping up, I want to quickly mention that we're in the process of creating a free membership for you where you're going to be able to access the entire library of conversations searchable by topic since 2017. When you become a member of KenNewhouse.com, you'll have instant access to my own personal library, the book notes, the highlights that I've captured from Steve Olsher's book, What is Your What? Discover the one amazing thing you were born to do. You'll also have access to the other books that I've featured on the show for the last few years, plus access to a weekly strategy guide that'll come into your inbox every Wednesday. The guide will feature all the links we mentioned on every show that links to books, resources, also other podcast episodes, as well as the most effective strategy we covered on that week's episode. Additionally, the guide will contain other articles that I found online that I know will be absolutely useful and valuable to you. So be sure to listen for the announcement when we launch the new free membership portal we're creating for you on kennewhouse.com. And in addition to all that I've mentioned, the first 100 subscribers will get a free digital copy of the updated version of my book, Profitable Again, as well as a copy of my newest book, Profitable Podcast Blueprint. And speaking of using words to get clients now, Brian Kurtz is my guest next week. Kurtz is the author of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, Over Deliver: Build a Business for a Lifetime by Playing the Long Game of Direct Response Marketing. As you probably already know, Kurtz worked closely with over a half dozen of the greatest copywriters and marketers that have ever lived. I'm talking about people including Eugene Schwartz, Gary Benzavinga, the late Clayton Makepeace, and many, many others. Like the who's who's list of marketers and copywriters, like the best that have ever lived. Over the last 36 years, Kurtz has earned the reputation for helping coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, and professionals become better marketers and copywriters. His clients include legends like John Carlton, Frank Kern, mean old Dan Kennedy, and many of the internet's greatest marketing geniuses I simply don't have time to list. So join me for a conversation with Brian Kurtz next week. Have a great week, and I'll see you on Monday. Take care.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.